bullies humiliate the new student and beat him up. He tells his father what happened, and his father goes to the school. The bullies even try to attack his father, too. James Parker stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror of Westridge High School, examining the fresh bruise forming under his left eye. At 15, he was the newest sophomore at school, having moved to town just 3 weeks ago. His lanky frame and quiet demeanor had made him an immediate target. At 5'10" and barely 130 pounds, his thin arms and awkward posture screamed easy victim to the school's established hierarchy of tormentors. His shaggy brown hair fell over his eyes as he dabbed at the swelling with a damp paper towel. He sighed deeply, knowing that explaining this to his father would be impossible to avoid. His dad, Marcus Parker, had specifically warned him about exactly this scenario when they'd moved to this small town. "Just keep your head down," he'd said. "We don't need that kind of attention." James understood why. His father wasn't just any dad. He was Marcus the Demolisher Parker, a former MMA heavyweight champion with an undefeated professional record. Though retired from competition for nearly 5 years now, his reputation in fighting circles remained legendary. But neither of them had expected the particularly vicious welcome committee that awaited at Westridge High. Derek Thompson and his two sidekicks, burly football player Jason Brooks and the wiry, unpredictable Zach Wilson, had singled out James from day one. Derek stood confidently at 6'2", his muscular build the result of being the star quarterback with college scouts. Already circling, his perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive clothes marked him as someone from the wealthy side of town, and his striking good looks ensured teachers often overlooked his cruelty. "Hey, new kid," the familiar voice echoed through the bathroom, sending a chill down James's spine. He glanced up to see Derek's reflection in the mirror, flanked by Jason and Zach. "Looking a little rough there. Need some makeup to cover that up?" Derek laughed, his voice bouncing off the tiled walls. James said nothing, keeping his eyes down as he tossed the paper towel into the trash. He tried to move past them toward the exit, but Jason's broad shoulder blocked his path. "I asked you a question, stick boy," Derek continued, shoving James back against the sink. "What's wrong? Don't talk much?" "Please just leave me alone," James muttered, his voice barely audible. He could feel his heart pounding, the fighting instincts his father had trained into him since childhood, screaming to defend himself. But he remembered his promise. After what had happened at their last school, his father had made him swear, no fighting no matter what. They couldn't afford another incident. "Leave me alone," Zach mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "What are you going to do if we don't, huh?" James remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. The bathroom door opened and a group of freshmen peeked in, quickly retreating when they saw what was happening. Nobody wanted to get involved. "That's what I thought," Derek sneered, grabbing James's backpack and dumping its contents into the sink. "See you at lunch, loser." The three boys left, their laughter lingering in the air as James salvaged his now damp notebooks and textbooks. He was going to be late for class again. Mrs. Reynolds, his English teacher, had already given him one warning about tardiness. She, like most of the Westridge staff, seemed indifferent to the obvious bullying happening right under their noses. "Just 2 more years," James thought to himself. 2 more years and I'm out of here." But even as he gathered his belongings, he wondered if he could last that long. The morning passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. By the time lunch period arrived, James had resigned himself to his daily ritual of finding the most isolated corner of the cafeteria. He'd learned that sitting too close to Derek's territory, the central tables where the football team and cheerleaders gathered, was asking for trouble. James unwrapped his sandwich, trying to make himself as invisible as possible. From across the room he could see Derek holding court, occasionally glancing in his direction with a predatory smile. Something was coming. He could feel it. It didn't take long. "Move it, Parker," Jason commanded, appearing suddenly beside James's table. Before James could react, Jason had shoved his tray off the edge, sending his lunch crashing to the floor. The cafeteria fell silent for a moment before erupting in scattered laughter. James knelt down to clean up the mess, his face burning with humiliation. "Oops, so clumsy," Derek called out, approaching with Zach trailing behind. "Let me help you with that." Instead of helping, he kicked the scattered food, sending it sliding. Further across the floor, Mrs. Patel, the lunch monitor, glanced over but quickly looked away. Intervention would only make things worse. Everyone knew Derek's father was the school board president. "Thanks," James mumbled sarcastically, continuing to pick up the mess. Derek's foot suddenly pressed down on James's hand, pinning it to the floor. "What was that? I don't think I heard you properly." James looked up, meeting Derek's eyes for the first time. Something in his gaze must have startled the bully, because Derek's smile faltered momentarily. In that split second, the trained fighter in James had surfaced, calculating, measuring, assessing his opponent. I could take all three of them right now, James thought, the techniques flooding his mind automatically. His father had trained him since he could walk, but the memory of his father's disappointed face after the incident at their previous school held him back. Marcus had been very clear. We moved to this town for a fresh start. No fighting. Period. Nothing, James said, looking back down. Just leave me alone. That's better, Derek smirked, removing his foot. Know your place, freak. The rest of the day followed the usual pattern. A trip in the hallway between classes. Books knocked from his hands. Whispers of weirdo and loser, trailing him like a shadow. By the final bell, James was exhausted from the constant vigilance. As James walked toward the school exit, a strange sensation made him glance across the parking lot. His stomach dropped. There, leaning against his black pickup truck, was his father. Marcus Parker cut an impressive figure even in casual clothes. At 6'4", with a powerful build that years of retirement hadn't softened, he commanded attention without effort. His dark beard was neatly trimmed, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes did little to disguise his identity. Several passing students were already doing double takes, whispering to each other, "Please don't let Derek see him." James prayed silently as he hurried toward the truck, but luck wasn't on his side. "Yo, Parker!" Derek's voice rang out behind him. "Who's the old guy, your bodyguard?" James quickened his pace, hoping his father wouldn't hear, but Marcus was already watching the interaction, his expression unreadable. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Derek continued, jogging to catch up with Jason and Zach at his heels. James reached his father, whispering urgently, "Let's just go, Dad. Please." Marcus studied his son's face, his eyes narrowing at the bruise. "What happened to your eye, James?" "Nothing. I walked into a door. Can we please just go?" "Hey, new kids, Daddy," Derek called out, stopping a few feet away. "Your son's been telling us all about you. Says you're some kind of tough guy." James froze. He'd never mentioned anything about his father to anyone at school. Marcus straightened to his full height, turning slowly to face the three teenagers. "Is that right?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. Something in his tone made Derek hesitate, but the presence of his friends and the watching students bolstered his courage. "Yeah, said you were some big-shot fighter or something, but looking, had your son, I'd say the apple fell pretty far from the tree." Marcus's expression didn't change, but James could see the subtle shift in his stance. Weight-centered, balanced, ready. It was the same stance he'd seen countless times before. His father entered the ring. "James, get in the truck," Marcus said quietly. "Dad, now son." James climbed into the passenger seat, his heart racing. Through the window he could see his father saying something to Derek, whose smug expression gradually transformed into uncertainty. After a moment, Marcus walked around to the driver's side and got in without a word. As they pulled away, James caught sight of Derek staring after them, a strange look on his face. "Dad, what did you say to him?" Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "Just introduced myself." After a pause, he added, "Want to tell me what really happened to your eye?" The drive home was filled with James's reluctant explanation of the past 3 weeks. The daily torment, the teachers who looked the other way, the systematic isolation. With each detail, Marcus's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but he remained silent until James finished. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he finally asked. James stared out the window at the passing houses. "You said not to fight. You said we needed to keep a low profile." Marcus pulled the truck into their driveway and turned off the engine. "I said you shouldn't fight. I never said you shouldn't tell me when you're being hurt." That evening, after a dinner of ordered pizza, Marcus disappeared into the garage where he'd set up a small home gym. James could hear the rhythmic thud of fists against the heavy bag, a sound that had been the backdrop of his childhood. When his father emerged 2 hours later, his expression was resolved. "Tomorrow," Marcus announced, "I'm coming to speak with your principal." The next morning, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks instead of his usual t-shirt and jeans, Marcus walked James to the school's main entrance. Heads turned as they passed, students whispering and pointing. "Dad, everyone's staring," James muttered. "Let them," Marcus replied calmly, holding the door open. They'd barely entered the main hallway when Derek and his friends appeared. Derek stopped short when he saw Marcus, but quickly recovered his bravado. "Back for more, old man?" Derek called. Out, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Marcus ignored him, continuing toward the administration office with James at his side. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" Derek moved to block their path, Jason and Zach flanking him. James noticed his father's slight exhalation, a fighter's technique to center himself. Move aside, son. I have a meeting with Principal Goodwin. Make me, Derek challenged, giving Marcus a slight shove. The hallway fell silent. No one touched Marcus Parker that way, not professionals in the octagon and certainly not teenage boys. You have one chance to walk away, Marcus said quietly. Take it. Derek's laugh was forced. Or what? You'll beat up a kid. That'll look good in the papers. Derek, don't, James warned, seeing the dangerous glint in his father's eye. Shut up, loser, Derek snapped, then returned his attention to Marcus. Why don't you go back to wherever you came from? We don't need your kind here. Marcus remained perfectly still. My kind? Yeah, trash who think they're something special because they can throw a punch. A small smile played at the corner of Marcus's mouth, the same smile James had seen in old fight videos just before his father demolished an opponent. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that for your sake. Now move aside. Make me, Derek repeated, giving Marcus another harder shove. What happened next occurred so quickly that most witnesses would later give conflicting accounts. Marcus's hand shot out, grasping Derek's wrist in what appeared to be a simple defensive move, but the pressure points he targeted caused Derek's knees to buckle, bringing the teenager down to a kneeling position with a gasp of surprise and pain. See him go! Jason lunged forward, swinging wildly. Marcus sidestepped with the fluid grace of a lifelong fighter, never releasing Derek as Jason's momentum carried him stumbling past. Zach was smarter, circling cautiously before attacking from the side. With his free hand, Marcus deflected Zach's punch and used the boy's forward motion to send him sprawling into Jason. The entire exchange took less than 5 seconds. Derek remained on his knees, his face contorted in pain from the precise pressure Marcus maintained on his wrist. Fighting isn't about size or strength, Marcus said calmly, his voice carrying in the silent hallway. It's about discipline, respect, and knowing when not to fight. He released Derek's wrist and stepped back. Something you boys clearly need to learn. Derek scrambled to his feet, rubbing his wrist. You're crazy. I'm calling my dad. He'll have you arrested. For what? Marcus asked. Defending myself? There are 30 witnesses here who saw you assault me first. He gestured to the crowd of students, many with phones raised, recording everything. But go ahead, call him. In fact, I'd very much like to meet your father. What's going on here? Principal Goodwin's voice cut through the tension as he pushed through the gathered students. The short, balding man looked between the teenagers and Marcus with growing alarm. Who are you? Marcus Parker, James's father. We had an appointment this morning to discuss the ongoing bullying my son has been experiencing. Principal Goodwin's eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Parker, yes. Please let's continue this discussion in my office. Everyone else get to class immediately. The crowd began to disperse reluctantly, phones still recording. Derek, Jason, and Zach remained rooted to the spot until Principal Goodwin pointed firmly down the hall. You three, to my office as well, now. The meeting in Principal Goodwin's office lasted over an hour. By lunchtime, rumors had spread throughout Westridge High like wildfire. Some claimed Marcus had knocked out all 3 boys with a single punch. Others insisted he'd merely intimidated them with his presence. The truth, that he had neutralized their aggression with minimal force and maximum control, was less sensational but more impressive to those who understood fighting. When James entered the cafeteria, the usual buzz of conversation hushed momentarily before erupting in excited whispers. He kept his head down, grabbing his lunch and heading for his usual isolated corner. To his surprise, a girl from his English class, Sophia Kim, who had never acknowledged his existence before, slid into the seat across from him. Is it true your dad is Marcus the Demolisher Parker? She asked without preamble. James nodded reluctantly. That's so cool. My brother has all his fights on DVD. He was like the best heavyweight ever before he retired. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. Before James could respond, more students approached, asking questions about his father. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, James found himself the center of positive attention. Derek and his friends were noticeably absent from lunch. When they finally reappeared in the afternoon classes, they kept their distance from James. Their usual swagger diminished. After the final bell, James found his father waiting in the parking lot again. Students openly stared now, some even approaching to ask for autographs, which Marcus declined with polite firmness. How was your day? Marcus asked as they drove home. Different, James admitted. No one bothered me, but everyone wanted to talk. About you? Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That wasn't exactly the low profile we were aiming for. What happened in the meeting with Principal Goodwin? Derek's father joined us by phone, threatened to sue me, the school, probably the state if he could figure out how. Marcus chuckled. changed his tune when I mentioned the video evidence of his son assaulting me and the documented pattern of bullying against you. Are they expelled? James couldn't keep the hopeful note from his voice. Suspended for now. But there will be a disciplinary hearing next week. Marcus glanced at his son. Which means you'll need to testify about what's been happening. James's stomach knotted. Everyone will hate me. No, Marcus said firmly. They won't. Standing up to bullies, the right way through proper channels, doesn't make you a target. It makes you someone with self-respect. That night, as James was finishing his homework, a notification on his phone alerted him to a new social media. Tag. Someone had posted a video of the morning's confrontation. The footage was shaky but clear enough to show Derek shoving his father, followed by Marcus's lightning-quick defensive moves. Comments were flooding in. OMG, that's the Marcus Parker. Derek messed with the wrong dad, LMO. Parker barely moved, and took down all three, but the comment that caught James's eye came from an unexpected source. I've been watching these guys bully the new kid for weeks and said nothing. I'm sorry, James. That wasn't right. It was from Michael Chen, a quiet student who sat behind James in calculus. More comments like it followed, students admitting their complicity through silence, promising to do better. The following Monday, Derek, Jason, and Zach returned from their suspension. The dynamic had shifted dramatically. Where once they had ruled the hallways, now they moved quickly between classes, keeping their heads down. The whispers followed them instead of James. During lunch period, James was surprised when Derek approached his table alone. The cafeteria quieted as students watched, anticipating another confrontation. Can I sit? Derek asked, his voice lacking its usual arrogance. James hesitated before nodding. Derek sat staring at his tray for a long moment before speaking. My dad wants me to apologize to you. Is that the only reason you're here? Derek looked up, his expression conflicted. No, I mean yes at first, but he trailed off. Your dad could have really hurt me. Us. But he didn't. That's not who he is, James said simply. Fighting is a sport for him, not a way to hurt people. He said something. To me, that first day in the parking lot, Derek's voice dropped. He said he knew what it was like to be angry all the time, to want to prove yourself through fear. Said it nearly destroyed him until he found a proper outlet and proper training. James nodded. His father had rarely spoken about his early life, but James knew enough to understand that Marcus had once been the angry young man with something to prove. Anyway, Derek continued, he offered to train me. Said I have natural athleticism but no discipline. A reluctant smile tugged at his mouth. Called me a bull in a china shop. That sounds like Dad, James agreed, unable to hide his surprise. Are you going to take him up on it? Derek shrugged. Maybe, probably. He pushed his food around his plate. I'm sorry, all right? About your eye and all the other stuff, it was messed up. It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but James sensed its sincerity. Thanks. They ate in awkward silence for a few minutes before Derek spoke again. So you can fight too, right? Your dad must have taught you. James considered his answer carefully. I know how. I choose not to. Why? Because at our last school I didn't make that choice. James met Derek's eyes steadily. A guy wouldn't leave me alone. I put him in the hospital. That's why we moved here, for a fresh start. Derek's eyes widened. Seriously? Broke his jaw in 2 places. Dad made me promise after that. No fighting unless it's life or death. James's voice was matter-of-fact, but the memory still haunted him. That's not who I want to be. An understanding passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but a mutual respect that hadn't existed before. After school, James was surprised to find not only his father waiting in the parking lot, but Derek's father as well. Richard Thompson, the school board president, easily recognizable from his campaign billboards around town. The two men appeared to be in deep conversation. This looks interesting, Derek muttered, stopping beside James. They approached cautiously. Richard Thompson was a smaller man than Marcus, dressed in an expensive suit that emphasized his corporate success. Despite their physical differences, both men carried themselves with the confidence of people accustomed to authority. Here they are, Marcus said, noticing their approach. James, this is Mr. Thompson. We've been having a productive discussion. Richard. Thompson extended his hand first to James, then to his own son. Derek tells me you two had a civil lunch together. James nodded, noting Derek's embarrassed expression. Good, that's a start. Richard looked between the boys. Mr. Parker has made an interesting proposal. He's offering to start a training program at the community center. Self-defense, discipline, respect, the real foundations of martial arts, not just the fighting. When I saw how many students were recording on their phones instead of helping, Marcus explained, I realized there's a bigger problem here than just 3 boys. This community needs to learn about standing up without resorting to cruelty or violence. Derek looked skeptical. And my dad agreed to this. I'm funding it, Richard corrected, as part of the school's anti-bullying initiative. Participation will be voluntary, of course, but strongly encouraged for certain students. He gave his son a meaningful look. Over the following weeks, Westridge High underwent a subtle transformation. Marcus's training sessions at the community center started small, just 10 students, including a reluctant Derek and an enthusiastic Jason and Zach. By the end of the month, attendance had tripled. The school's hallways felt different. Not perfect. Bullying doesn't disappear overnight, but changed. James found himself with a growing circle of friends, no longer the isolated target, but someone other students looked up to. One afternoon, as James was demonstrating a basic defensive stance to a group of freshmen in the community center, he caught sight of his father watching from the doorway, a proud smile on his face. "You're a natural teacher," Marcus commented later as they drove home. "Better than I was at your age." "I learned from the best," James replied. "Not just the fighting, but when not to fight." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's always been the harder lesson, one I didn't learn until much later than you." As they pulled into their driveway, James noticed Derek's car parked on the street. The former bully was waiting, dressed in workout clothes. "Extra training session?" James asked. "Something like that," Marcus answered with a smile. "Derek's got potential. Reminds me of myself at that age, all that raw power and no idea how to channel it." James watched as his father greeted Derek with a respectful bow, which Derek returned somewhat awkwardly. The same boy who had targeted him for weeks was now learning humility and discipline from his father. "Coming, James?" Marcus called. "I could use your help demonstrating the new form." James smiled, joining them on the front lawn where his father had laid out practice mats. As the three moved through the fluid motions of the kata, neighbors stopped to watch the unusual sight: the professional fighter, his son, and the school bully, moving in perfect synchronization under the afternoon sun. It wasn't the revenge fantasy James had sometimes indulged in during those first difficult weeks. It was something better, a transformation that changed not just his own status but the culture around him. Through his father's intervention and his own resilience, James had found not just safety, but purpose. And Derek? He was learning the same. Lesson James had years ago: true strength isn't about dominating others, but mastering yourself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the practice mats, James caught his father's approving nod. They had come to this town seeking a fresh start, a place to blend in and avoid attention. Instead, they had found something unexpected, a community that needed exactly what they had to offer. Sometimes, James reflected, the best way to stand up for yourself isn't to strike back, but to reach out, even to those who once hurt you. That was the true lesson his father had been teaching him all along.